Welcome to Not So Simple. My name is David Driscoll. I want to talk about how to make a recommendation, and more importantly, how to make a recommendation very quickly. I want to begin with an anecdote. About 30 years ago, 25 or 30 years ago, I was asked by a portfolio manager for help. And she was getting calls from her research analysts about potential investment recommendations. And her complaint was some of these calls would go on for in excess of an hour. That is, the person would leave a message longer than an hour. She talked about how one of them had even begun with the invention or discovery of fire. And she wanted a quick way for people to make a recommendation and that she could process, and then they'd have more time later if she thought that that preliminary recommendation had merit. So that's what this content was born from, the desire to get a recommendation quickly. So here's the model. And I looked in all kinds of sources. Here's the model. Number one, make a brief background statement. And when I say brief, I mean a sentence fragment. Not two sentences, not a paragraph. And I'll give you an example of this toward the end of the video. Number two, state your recommendation. State it up front. That way everything that follows will be looked at relative to that recommendation. Number three, after you've stated your recommendation, provide 3 supporting points. Now there's a quality to 3 that I'll talk about both in this video and in other videos. People can hold 3 things in their head. 3 is a powerful model for presenting. So state the background, state the recommendation, make 3 supporting points, give 1 contrary point of view. Why? Number 1, there is going to be a contrary point of view. In almost any recommendation you make, there are alternative recommendations that could have been made, or there are threats to that recommendation. Also, it shows that you've done your research, so it increases your credibility. So state your recommendation, state your background, give your recommendation, 3 supporting points, 1 contrary point of view, restate the recommendation, call for questions. Now you can do this in about 5 minutes or less, often much less. If you've got more time, you can expand on these elements. But if your goal is to make a recommendation, to do so very quickly, to create interest in which later on you may be given more time, this is one way to do it that I've seen. It's very effective in a lot of business settings. Let me give you an example. So let's say, let me just do this instead of talk about it. I'll give you a recommendation using this format. I was asked to make a recommendation with regard to hiring 1 candidate from among 3 candidates, Peter, Paul, and Mary. I want to recommend Mary. I have 3 reasons. Number 1, she has the skills and experience that we need to get this job done. Number 2, she's demonstrated a strong interest in learning new skills. And in our organization, that's a real key value, because we're working in technology, and our technology changes weekly, monthly, certainly yearly. And so we need people who can learn new skills and are interested in learning new skills. Number 3, she's a good cultural fit. She's a team player. We talked to her references, and we talked to some of her colleagues, and that was something that was uniform in what they brought up. Mary's willingness and ability to work as a team. One downside to Mary is that on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, she has to leave at 5 o'clock in terms of to support work-life balance. And as a company, we're committed to work-life balance. She's also agreed that she's prepared to come in early almost any day of the week to make up for having to leave early if we need that overtime. So on balance, I'd like to recommend Mary for this position. Are there any questions? Now that's an example of a very quick recommendation. There's a lot more that I could say, but I think that took less than 5 minutes. So once again, I'll restate. Make the recommendation. Brief background, very brief. A sentence fragment. Make the recommendation. 3 supporting points, 1 contrary point of view. Restate the recommendation. Call for questions. Now let's ask and answer the question, what's in this for you? What's in this video for you? What can you do? It's vitally important that if you've got content that you can use from this video, a process that you can use, that you apply it not next week or next month, but today. So here are some ideas. One, if you're a team leader or a manager, have your team watch the video and then come back to you with a recommendation prepared using the format. That'll immediately transfer the results to others on your team. Second, you can think back to a recommendation you've made fairly recently and put it into this format. See how it changed. See how coming up with 3 supporting points and one downside or one contrary point of view changes the nature of your recommendation. And remember, that contrary point of view is a way to demonstrate your credibility. Also gives you a chance to ask and answer the hardest question. As someone's making a recommendation to you, this is a third action you can take. Break it down by asking questions into this format. So you might say, well, what are the supporting points for your recommendations? Or what do you think are the 3 most important supporting points? So you can literally use the word force here, but you can get other people to use this format by asking effective questions. So there's 3 specific things. Get your team to do it, deconstruct the past recommendation, and ask questions of somebody making a recommendation to you to kind of get them into this format. If you got something from this video, hit like, because again, that tells me something. And number 2, hit subscribe, because there's more to come.